Right. It's time to do a freaking Shadow Monk already. It's been over 6 months since the 2024 rules have come out. What is taking me so long? I don't know. I got nothing. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, I'd like to take a deep dive into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, or if you just really like theory crafting, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I am so glad you're here. So thanks for watching. My name is Colby. Yes, Colby, like Colby College, where I got this t-shirt because I thought it would be hilarious, or Colby Cheese, or Colby, Kansas. Colby. Okay, I love Shadow Monks so much. The first 5e character I ever played was a Shadow Monk. Ariana was her name, and I will always love her with all of my heart. Monks have always been my favorite class. I've gone on record saying this a billion times. Thematically, conceptually, is there anything cooler in D&D 5e than this character who's basically Nightcrawler crossed with a ninja, blinding their target, stalking them in the darkness, bamfing all over the battlefield, striking with a ton of attacks, and vanishing into the shadows? I mean, for me, maybe not. Seriously, it is just dripping with delicious stalkery flavor, if stalkery can be thought of as a good thing. But see, the problem with the Shadow Monk is, as awesome as they are conceptually, for damage purposes, they're a little tricky to build around. I mean, their most interesting, unique, and I think mechanically powerful feature is the one they get right at level 3 that lets them cast the darkness spell, move it every turn, and see in that darkness. It's going to mean, among other things, easy advantage on your attacks and disadvantage on enemies' attacks against you, right? Most of the time. But like, the thing that makes monks potentially really solid damage dealers, especially now with the 2024 rules, is the fact that one, they get so many attacks thanks to the Flurry of Blows buff especially, and two, there are a lot of hard-hitting attacks on your turn. And with some additional buffs that monks saw in 2024, this has led to some really solid damage potential. See the Mantis of Mercy build, for one example. Unfortunately though, most of the ways to add damage to every attack come from spells that require concentration. But the darkness spell that Shadow Monks get and are theoretically using also requires concentration, so if we're using it and building around it as a Shadow Monk, which I think we should do most of the time, or else why play a Shadow Monk? Then we can't be concentrating on something else that's going to add damage to all of our attacks. The other ways to add damage to every hit don't really work very well either. The Barbarian's Rage doesn't let us concentrate on a spell, so that's out. The Paladin's Divine Favor, while concentration free now, is only available to Paladins, and as a monk, we just don't really have the ability scores to multiclass into Paladin unless we want to like dump our constitution, and that's never a good idea. And thus, it feels to me like if you want to play a Shadow Monk, you're going to have to settle for doing like maybe solid, but not necessarily amazing damage. If you're not okay with that, then I might suggest playing a different monk. But guess what? Solid but not amazing damage is totally fine. Not everyone needs to be the hardest hitting character in the game. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Liar! And there are so many freaking other awesome things you can bring to a character that don't involve doing 5.21 gigawatts of DPR.
1.21 gigawatts!
You know this. That might be why you wanted to play a Shadow Monk in the first place. Not to be the hardest hitter, but to be blinding your enemies, striking from the shadows, teleporting all over the battlefield, and bringing lots of great debilitating debuffs and utility and fun to your combat encounters that might not show up on the spreadsheet, but makes for a super effective ninja nonetheless. So let's build one, shall we? I proudly present D&D episode number 206, the new Shadow Monk. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. Man, like, Randall just gets better every week, right? I love this one so much. Like the hand coming out of the shadow and like the monk sort of like stepping out of it, having taken out her foe. Like it's so great. If you'd be interested in following Randall to see the other stuff that he's done, or potentially reaching out to him to see if you can commission him to create some art for your character or your entire party, I will put links in the video description as always on how to do so. All right, at level 1, for our starting class, we're going to start fighter. As always, when I take a fighter dip at level 1, it's not necessary, but man, we get a lot with a single level here. If darkness weren't a concentration spell, I might have gone a different route, but the fact that we get constitution saving throw proficiency, thus benefiting our concentration checks, right? Weapon mastery and a fighting style all for a single level makes it a no-brainer in my book. Feel free to make a different choice if you'd like. As for our species, elf. I love my elven monks because I think of them as like super lithe and agile generally, but also, sure, elven accuracy. Again, go a different route if you want. Human would be great to pick up an extra origin feat, dwarf to be a little more durable, halfling to be a little more lucky, gnomes because you like gnomes. Elf is optimal for damage, I think, but really only against like very high enemy armor classes does it make a significant difference, so plenty of other options, totally viable. As for what kind of elf to go with here, while drow feels a little more on point thematically for a shadow monk, the free spells that they get are a little redundant for what we're going to be doing, so I think I'd probably rather go wood elf personally for a little more speed and some really nice utility spells, but Shadar Kai would also be both super on point thematically, I think, and give us even more teleporting that comes along with some nice damage resistance too. So yeah, if you can use older species, that would probably be my first choice personally. As for our background, I'm going to say, as always, take an old one that you can customize or just a custom background if you can, but if not, Sailor will work just fine for us, since the origin feat that we want is probably going to be Tavern Brawler, I think, not because the feat lets us use a d4 plus our strength modifier for an unarmed strike, we won't be needing that, nor really because it gives us proficiency with improvised weapons, though that might be fun, but because it lets us re-roll the damage for our unarmed strikes if we get a 1, right? And we'll be making lots of those, and because we can also push an enemy 5 feet away from us when we hit them with an unarmed strike with this feat. No saving throw, no size restriction there, and that'll be handy once in a while, maybe to push them into a hazard or off a cliff, or if nothing else, away from your squishy ally so that your ally can run away without taking an opportunity attack, right? Forced movement is just kind of always nice to have. For our ability scores, I'm going to say, assuming the point buy method as always, let's go with a 15 dexterity, take a +2 there, a 15 wisdom and a +1, and then a 14 constitution. I'd love to have a higher con. You could swap that with your wisdom, but monks really get a lot out of a good wisdom score, so that's what I would do. For starting equipment, we are going to want to grab some finesse weapons with the right masteries, which generally means the scimitar and the short sword, right? I'd probably grab some scale mail armor as well, but just for this level, right? We'd be getting rid of it once we start taking monk levels. You decide if that's worth the investment. As a fighter 1, then, we get weapon masteries, of course, 3 of them, and thankfully, we can swap out 1 with simply a long rest. From this point forward, we don't need to take more fighter levels. That's nice. For now, yeah, I would grab the short sword, which has Vex, letting us get advantage on the next attack we make against our target if we hit them with that Vex weapon, and the scimitar, which has the Nick property, of course, which lets us do 2-weapon fighting, all simply with our action, right? Making an attack with the scimitar that would usually cost our bonus action as part of our attack action instead, freeing up our much needed bonus action, and that is perfect. I wish that monks could get some weapon masteries. Boy, would that be nice. But you know what? Again, we get a lot out of fighter, so I'm not that sad. We get a fighting style at fighter 1, and I would for sure grab 2-weapon fighting so that we can actually add our dexterity modifier to the damage that we deal with that nick attack. And then we get second wind, which lets us heal ourselves for a d10 plus our fighter level twice per day, recovering 1 use on a short rest. Hooray for survivability. Also, hooray for my channel members. Quick shout out, you guys. Thank you so much for your support. I love you. You mean everything to this channel. I could not do this without you. If you're not a member, I would really appreciate it if you would consider joining. There's a button down there. It says join. You click on it. It'll tell you about all the perks that you can get by being a member. And I make all of my perks available to any member that joins at just like silver tier or above. I would just ask that you pay what you think it's worth and what you can afford. Those perks include the write-ups that I create for each of these builds. I put them in a library and give you access to it so you can recreate the character yourself a little more easily if you'd like. Access to the D4 community Discord server, and even access to the monthly live Q&A hangout sessions that we do. Thanks for considering, and you know what? If you don't want to or don't feel like you can, that's fine. Watching, liking, subscribing, commenting, etc., all of those things are also great ways to support the channel, so thank you for doing any and or all of those things too. Okay. At level 2, yes, this sailor fighter of ours is taking monk levels. Now, why? Were they recruited by a ninja clan? Have they been an acolyte of said clan all along, honing first their martial skills before they start to learn the shadow arts? Whatever the reason, as a monk 1, we first get unarmored defense, which says that so long as we are unarmored and not using a shield, then our armor class is equal to 10 plus our dexterity plus our wisdom modifiers, for a decent AC of 16 right now. Not amazing, but not bad. But then also the martial arts feature, which says that, again, if we're unarmored and unshielded and are wielding only monk weapons, which are simple melee weapons and martial melee weapons specifically that have the light property, and yeah, they need to be melee weapons, sorry hand crossbow users, then we can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action, use a d6 in place of the normal unarmed strike or weapon damage die. That's our martial arts die, right? And that's going to scale. That's really great. And we can use our dexterity modifier instead of strength when we grapple or shove for our unarmed strike and for all of our damaging unarmed strikes and attacks with monk weapons. As a result then, if you wanted to, you could switch weapons at this point and masteries, right? From the short sword and the scimitar to like a hand axe or club and a dagger or light hammer or sickle if you wanted, like for different weapon properties or masteries, right? I think I'd actually probably go like club and dagger for this build here. Maybe treat the club like a blackjack, or better yet, like a tonfa or even a nunchuck, since we won't really need Vex from a short sword once we get darkness going, and slow from a club would be really nice. And the dagger also has the thrown property, so we could toss it in a pinch. And maybe, you know, we flavor that like a sai or a shuriken. I don't know. Flavor is free. Have fun with it. But at level 3, we would be a monk 2, and that means we get Monk's Focus, the feature formerly known as Ki. This gives us 2 focus points per monk level that reset on a short rest and can still be used to do one of 3 things. Flurry of Blows to make 2 unarmed strikes instead of 1 with a bonus action, which I'll be assuming that we're doing when I crunch the numbers. Step of the Wind to dash as a bonus action, or if we spend a focus point, dash and disengage, and Patient Defense to take the disengage action as a bonus action, or if we spend a focus point, disengage and dodge. Oh, this is so much better in 2024. Woo-hoo. We still get unarmored movement at this level 2 for an extra 10 feet of speed if we're unarmored and unshielded, and that will increase with monk level, which is nice. I mean, if you're a wood elf, you've got a base speed of 45 feet. Dang. And then we get the new and amazing Uncanny Metabolism, which lets us recover a martial arts die plus our monk level in hit points and all of our focus points when we roll initiative once per day. Oh, we needed this so bad. And I'm so happy that we get it early right here at monk 2. At level 4, we would be a monk 3, and that means we get deflect attacks, which now lets us deflect any bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damaging attack with our reaction, not just a ranged attack like it used to, right? Reducing the damage by a d10 plus our dexterity modifier plus our monk level. And if we reduce it to 0, we can spend a focus point to try and do 2 rolls of our martial arts die plus our dexterity modifier in damage to another creature, though they get to make a dexterity save to avoid it, right? We're no longer making a ranged attack. This feature is going to greatly enhance our survivability as a monk. And I'll maybe say this here. One of the things I think this character will be pretty dang great at is staying alive. More on that later, but enhanced survivability will be one thing that will make this character feel powerful and maybe make up for the fact that they're not going to be just like topping the damage charts, right? So yeah, staying alive, is good. But then we get our monk subclass here as well, and of course we're going to go with Shadow, and this is what they say about Shadow monks in the new Player's Handbook. Harness Shadow power for stealth and subterfuge. Warriors of Shadow practice stealth and subterfuge, harnessing the power of the Shadowfell. They are at home in darkness, able to draw gloom around themselves to hide, leap from shadow to shadow, and take on a wraith-like form. That sounds cool. So as a Shadow Monk, we get one feature, but it's really 3 features rolled into one. First, we can cast the Darkness spell for a single focus point now. It used to be 2, without spell components even. That's nice. Best of all, we can now just automatically see within the spell's area when we cast Darkness in this way. No more need for Warlock dips and Devil's Sight or blind fighting, right? And also, welcome, we can even move the Darkness to a space within 60 feet of ourselves at the start of every turn. This will be especially handy later when we're shadow stepping, right? But it's really handy all the time. For now though, let's talk about the pros and cons of Darkness for a bit. Longtime viewers of the channel know that I have used the spell plenty of times in past builds, especially early on in the channel, I think. Lately, I've become a lot less enamored with it because while, sure, casting it on an enemy or even on yourself or like something you're carrying, right, so that you're always shrouded in darkness, and thus, since we can see in that magical darkness, but our enemies likely can't without special senses, at least, it's magical darkness, regular dark vision doesn't grant vision here, right? And or our enemy too, we should have advantage on all of our attacks, and our enemies should have disadvantage on their attacks against us, and that is awesome. But the heavy price you pay is that you are often going to be making life difficult for your allies, since you and the enemies you're surrounding in this pretty big 30-foot bubble of darkness, right, are probably going to be unseeable for your friends. And this can lead to all sorts of problems, as many of you well know from firsthand experience. That said, we're playing a Shadow Monk, and this is sort of the subclass's main feature, right? Or at least one of them. So the first thing you've got to do when you want to play a Shadow Monk in a campaign is, say it with me, talk to your DM. And in this case especially, to the other players at your table as well. Let them know that you're going to be using this spell a lot, as it's sort of a part and parcel of who you are and what you do. Maybe your DM will homebrew something where you can spend extra focus points to give an ally or additional allies vision in your darkness as well. I like that idea. Maybe your paladin can take the blind fighting style instead of great weapon fighting, right? Which sucks anyways, so they can benefit from your darkness too. At the very least, talking to everybody should help manage frustration at the table and, try to position the darkness in a way that might have less negative impacts on your allies. You can move it every turn now. That should really help a ton. Put maybe just one enemy inside it with like the rest of the bubble kind of out of the way if you can, right? Then you run inside, attack the enemy, leaving others unaffected. Next turn, move it, rinse and repeat, right? Stuff like that. Anyways, like I've said, I'm just going to assume that we're using this every single combat encounter because otherwise I just kind of have a hard time understanding why we're playing a Shadow Monk. I know there are other features that they get later are cool too, and especially after level 11, darkness isn't necessarily required, but to me it's sort of their main feature and I want to play with it. Okay. Oh, Shadow Arts also gives us dark vision if we didn't have it. As an elf we do, in which case it increases the range of our dark vision by 60 feet up to 120 feet, which is pretty great. And finally, it lets us know the Minor Illusion cantrip, which can be awesome for getting up into all kinds of shenanigans, none of which I'm going to go into right now. No, I'm not planning on casting this like in combat to create a brick wall or a cardboard box that we can hide behind in combat. I will save such tomfoolery for my inevitable illusionist wizard build. At level 5, we would be a monk 4, and that means we get slow fall, which is so cool. It lets us use our reaction when we fall to reduce the damage by 5 times our monk level, which would be about 50 to 60 feet of falling on average without taking any damage. Nightcrawler always lands on his feet. And then we get a feat, and I'd want to take Elven Accuracy, and anytime I'm building a character who has 1, reliable advantage, and 2, is making attacks with anything other than strength, I'm considering this feat, no doubt. It'll bump our dexterity to 18, and then lets us roll 3 d20s to hit when we have advantage instead of 2. This does nice things for our crit chance and our hit chance, especially versus harder to hit enemies. It's really good. But man, in 2024, there are so many awesome plus dexterity half feats. I will talk about them later. So if you'd rather skip elf and elven accuracy, no worries at all. There are plenty of awesome, amazing other feats to choose from. At level 6, we would be a monk 5, and that means, first up, we get extra attack, which means that thanks to Nick Attack and Flurry of Blows, when we have the focus points for it, anyways, we will be making 5 attacks on our turn. 3 with our action, and 2 with our bonus action, and I am here for it. We also get Stunning Strike at level 5 so that we could, should we choose, spend a focus point when we hit to force the enemy to make a Constitution saving throw or be stunned until the beginning of our next turn, which would leave them incapacitated and give them disadvantage on Strength and Dexterity saving throws. If they succeed, they have their speed halved until our next turn instead, and then the next attack roll made against them, regardless of who makes it, has advantage. And you know what? I kind of really like this sort of silver lining booby prize, more than I did on other monk builds at least. You've got this enemy inside your bubble of darkness. They want to get away so they can see, but you've slowed them with your club attack, and now, if not stunned them outright, cut their speed in half, right? They're going to have a very hard time getting far away from you, to say nothing of them taking an opportunity attack from you if they do try to escape the shadows. It just feels very, I don't know, sinister and debilitating? Kind of terrifying, like, you can't escape from me, where are you trying to run to, little mouse, kind of thing. Don't forget, also, at this level, our martial arts die does get a bump up to 1d8, and this is just in time for our first damage report at level 6. So, as far as what combat looks like for us here, it's pretty straightforward. On round 1, we're putting darkness over our target with our action, running up to them and using a focus point, and Flurry of Blows to make 2 unarmed strikes against them. Don't forget to reroll 1s if you get them, thanks to Tavern Brawler. On subsequent rounds, we'll be making 3 attacks with our action, thanks to Nick, and 2 more unarmed strikes with Flurry of Blows, meaning that over the course of a 4-round combat encounter, we would have just enough focus points to pull this off every round, right? 1 focus point for darkness, and then 1 each round for Flurry of Blows. And thankfully, we get those focus points back on a short rest, and once per day can recover all of them when we roll initiative thanks to Uncanny Metabolism. I'm just not nearly as worried about running out of resources as I used to be, though, of course, your results may vary depending on your table and your adventuring day. Anyways, every hit will be made with Elven Accuracy's triple advantage, doing a d8 plus 4 every single time, for a total, potentially, of 5d8 plus 20. And thus, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 42 damage per round, averaged over a 4-round combat encounter, and against a 15 AC, it would be 41 DPR. And compared to other sustained damage builds that I've done to date for 2024, that's like right near the top of tier 1 at this level. Wait a sec, I thought you said this build wasn't gonna hit very hard. You're right, I did. Maybe I meant after tier 1, because yeah, not surprisingly, monks are really good early on now more than ever, especially with a fighter dip, I think. You could argue that, thanks to easy advantage, Shadow Monks might be the hardest hitting monk of all monks at tier 1, though that Mantis of Mercy was outpacing us here at most enemy armor classes, so maybe not. We're up there though, no doubt, and it feels awesome. The question is, can we stay near the top as we level up? Let's find out. At level 7, we would be a monk 6, and we get 2 solid features here. First, Empowered Strikes, which says that when we deal damage with an unarmed strike, it can deal the usual bludgeoning damage or force damage, which is great since plenty of monsters do still have resistance to bludgeoning damage, but very few have resistance to force. And then, arguably, the coolest Shadow Monk feature, yes, Shadow Step. This says that when we are entirely in dim light or darkness, not just like a little pinky, we can use a bonus action to teleport up to 60 feet, that's double Misty Step for those counting, to an unoccupied space that is also in dim light or darkness. What's more, we have advantage on our next melee attack made before the end of this turn. Right, so thankfully we can both see in and move our darkness at the beginning of each turn now. So hopefully we can either move our darkness over to us and then bamf to an area of dim light or darkness that we want to get to, or better yet, I think, move our darkness over to our target, run to an area of dim light or darkness if need be, and then bamf into the bubble to make attacks. And yeah, the awesomeness factor here is just off the charts, right? Unfortunately, for my purposes, It just doesn't really show up in the spreadsheets. But if it means getting to an enemy you otherwise wouldn't be able to, whether because they're up on a ledge or on the other side of a chasm or behind a prison cage or just flat out too far away, well, this will improve our DPR, right? Since we'll be making attacks that we otherwise might not have been able to. To say nothing, of course, of the utility this might provide. I love it, and man, is it fun to use in-game, now more than ever. At level 8, we would be a monk 7, and that means we get evasion, which lets us take half damage on a failed save against things we make a dexterity save against, like a fireball, and 0 damage if we succeed, so great. And then at level 9, we would be a monk 8, and that means another feat. And like I said before, there are just so many fantastic half feats for dexterity out there that would let us bump our dex by 1 and give us lots of cool other benefits that I think I kind of have to break with my typical MO here and take yet another dex half feat at this level. You could, of course, just cap your dexterity now so that you could start working on your wisdom like the next time you get a feat, and I would not fault you in the slightest for doing so. But I really do kind of think that the greatest strength of the Shadow Monk isn't so much their damage, but it's more like in the way that they can just make life miserable for 1 or 2 enemies. So if your job is more of a disruptor where you focus on a high priority target or 2 and just kind of ruin their day while the rest of your team takes out the trash, well, what targets in D&D are higher priority than spellcasters? In most fights, none. And for that reason, I think I'd take Mage Slayer here. Man, this is such a great feat, and I honestly don't take it enough on my builds. It would bump our dexterity to 19, and then says that when we damage a creature that is concentrating, it has disadvantage on its concentration saves. So not only could you potentially stun that mage with Stunning Strike, breaking their concentration, right? But even if they made that save or used a legendary resistance for it, well, we are going to make them do 5 more saving throws with our attacks every round, and every single one of their concentration checks are going to have disadvantage now. Nobody is holding on to their concentration when we're around. And think about it, darkness is already a great way to shut down casters. So many spells require you to see your target, right? Not all, but a lot of them. Couple that with the fact that we're doing a pretty great job of keeping them from getting out of the darkness with all of our slowing potential, and now almost guaranteeing that they won't be able to hold on to the concentration with us around. You know, taken all together, yeah, we're a pretty solid anti-mage. And I kind of almost do see this character as being a little bit of an anti-mage 2.0. Man, I haven't thought about that build in forever. It was a lot of fun. And I think if I didn't go Elf and Elven Accuracy on this build, this would be the first feat that I grabbed, because not only does it help us disrupt a caster's concentration, speaking of legendary resistance, the feat basically gives us that too, saying that if we fail an Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma save, at least, we can just succeed instead, once per short rest. That's amazing, and coupled with evasion, will help us resist that caster's most powerful spells most of the time. I love it. Alright, at level 9, it is time for our next damage report. Since last check, we haven't really done anything to increase our damage. Yikes. Sure, we could have capped our dexterity at level 9 instead, and that would have given us a slight bump, but yeah, as always, these levels are sort of the no man's land of monk damage increases. So, I mean, no scaling spells that increase our damage, no subclass feature that gives us any kind of bump. But hey, we've picked up a lot of things to increase our survivability, utility, style, and nuisance capacity. So we've absolutely grown in power. It's just not going to show up on the spreadsheet. Against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 42 damage per round, and against a 16 AC, it's 41 damage per round. Pretty much identical to last check. And you know, had we capped our dexterity instead to give us at least something for damage, we would have been at 47 and 46. So about 5 more damage per round on average. Not nothing, but nothing crazy either. So yeah, I think it's worth it to grab Mage Slayer instead, personally, to really help us lean into that shut down the most dangerous enemy thing we've got going. I mean, if it's a martial enemy we're on, no problem. They have disadvantage on attacks against us, we have deflect attack, and we can snare them or even stun them inside of our bubble of darkness, making them essentially worthless while we pummel them to death. If it's a caster, well, we've got amazing tools for that now too. I love where this build is at. Let's see if we can make it even better. At level 10, we would be a monk 9, and that means we get acrobatic movement. This is admittedly kind of the lowest point in a monk's career, or at least the least exciting level, I suppose. You can now move over liquid and up vertical surfaces on your turn, but don't end your turn there or else you're going to fall, right? Situationally useful, unquestionably cool, but that's all that we get here, other than another focus point. Oof. But at level 11, we're a monk 10, and we totally redeem ourselves.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this. And totally redeem yourself!
First up, we get self-restoration, which lets us just end the poisoned, charmed, or frightened condition on ourselves at the end of our turn. And also, we don't get exhaustion from not eating or drinking. This is so much better than it used to be in 2014. And I feel like they should have given this to monks at level 9, honestly, to make that level feel less meh, because this is a pretty nice feature. And then we also, though, at this level get the very amazing heightened focus, which basically improves our 3 initial martial arts abilities. If we spend a focus point for patient defense, we can also now add 2 times our martial arts die in temporary hit points. If we spend a focus point for Step of the Wind, we can bring another creature with us when we dash, and they don't provoke opportunity attacks either. This is so great. And then when we use Flurry of Blows, we can make 3 unarmed strikes instead of 2, for a total, for us, of 6 attacks on our turn if we have the focus to spend, and that's incredible. I wish we were adding damage to every hit, but that's okay. We're getting advantage while we debuff instead, and that's really great. At level 12, we would be a monk 11, and as a shadow monk, that means we get improved shadow step, and this feature is sort of like so awesome, and again isn't really going to show up on the spreadsheet at the same time, right? Because it says that now when we shadow step, we can ignore the dim light or darkness requirement for the teleportation if we spend a key point to do it, and we can also make 1 unarmed strike as part of the bonus action that we use to teleport. When we use shadow step, this will add a little more damage, and hopefully we won't need it all that often. Right? I mean, part of me kind of went, well, maybe we don't concentrate on darkness anymore. Maybe we look for something else to concentrate on, since now we can teleport around without needing darkness. But, mechanically, or at least spreadsheet-wise, the real benefit to darkness was the easy advantage. So this would give us advantage on 1 hit, but we want advantage on all of our hits, and maybe we take a weapon mastery that gives us topple. I mean, there's things you can do, right? But again, I don't know how often I'm going to be shadow stepping in combat. Hopefully not all that often, because I would rather use my bonus action for 3 Flurry of Blows attacks instead of 1 unarmed strike with advantage. So I'm just going to kind of keep assuming that we're using the darkness spell, and this will be really great to have if we find ourselves fighting in a room full of bright light. And yeah, not everything that is useful and potent is gonna show up on the spreadsheets, and that is okay. Fortunately, our martial arts die gets a bump at this level, right, up to a D10, and that will show up on the spreadsheets, even if it's a relatively minor bump. But then at level 13, we would be a monk 12, and that means we get another feat, and I want like 7 or 8 of them. I love Defensive Duelist for a shield-like armor class increase, though with the monk's deflect attack, we kind of have a defensive reaction traffic jam with it. Grappler is totally worth considering. I haven't even talked about it, but monks are amazing grapplers, as again I think we showed with that Mantis of Mercy build. We've got our hands full of weapons though, so it doesn't really work on this build, but especially if you wanted to go like Thrycreen or Loxodon, right? Grappling is one more way for you to shut down an enemy and keep him in the dark. The Speedy feat is nice. The Skulker feat is nice. Skill Expert is worth considering, but I think the one that I would grab here is Sentinel. I love this feat. It would take our dexterity to 20, finally, and also let us still make an opportunity attack when an enemy takes the disengage action, lets us make a reaction attack against an enemy if they attack someone other than us, and finally reduces an enemy's move speed to 0 if we hit them with an opportunity attack. So yeah, it's just kind of one more way for us to really make sure that an enemy doesn't escape our shadowy nightmare. And it feels super on point for like what I'm trying to build around, I think. Yeah, this is a bit of a reaction traffic jam here still, I guess, but at least we now have like a great defensive reaction and a more likely shot at an offensive reaction too, letting us sort of choose as the situation arises. This then brings us to our next damage report. Since last check, For damage, we've capped our dexterity, increased our attacks to a d10 each, and above all added another unarmed strike when we flurry of blows. All great little bumps. We've also picked up some nice utility, mobility, survivability, offensive reaction potential, and just general awesomeness as well. But now, against enemies with a 10 armor class over a 4-round combat encounter, on average we would do 64 damage per round, and against a 17 AC it would be 62 DPR. There we go, a solid 50% increase over the last 2 checks. Though, since we didn't really move the needle at all at level 9, right, we're kind of middle of tier 2 right now compared to other damage dealing builds that I've done to date. That's okay. We are so much freaking cooler than all of them put together, it doesn't even matter. So, how do we end the build? Well, at level 14, of course you could stay monk. There are solid arguments for doing so, but the vast majority of the gains in monk from this point on are of the defensive and utility variety. But they're still fantastic and should absolutely be considered. If we wanted to focus a little bit on our damage to at least kind of keep up with other tier 2 builds, I think we'd want to multi-class a bit more here. Now, in the past, and I mean, I guess in Baldur's Gate 3, take a drink, the thing to do with a Shadow Monk was go Rogue Assassin and or Gloomstalker Ranger. They're both on point thematically and brought some nice power to the Shadow Monk. But with the changes that both of those subclasses got in 2024, I think I'll pass. Sneak attack is nice, but Assassin doesn't do a lot for us since we're using our action on round 1 to cast Darkness, right? I mean, I guess we could do that on round 2 instead, but meh. Gloomstalker isn't bad, definitely consider it, though it's a lot less powerful than it used to be. And we don't really need their most powerful feature, I think, the they can't see you if they rely on dark vision thing, because they can't see us with just regular dark vision anyway, right, if we're using darkness. There's an argument that goes, well, now we don't have to use the darkness spell if we're a Gloomstalker, assuming that we're kind of always fighting in dim light and darkness anyway, but that's not necessarily an assumption I feel like I can make. I think the way to go here is just more fighter levels, personally. We've already got 1, and we get a lot for just a little more investment. Plus, I actually think there's some nice thematic synergy potential here as well. Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. First of all, at Fighter 2, I mean, we get Action Surge, of course. And yeah, this is so good that it is always worth considering. And maybe we should have grabbed it earlier, if for no other reason, so that we can just jump right in on round 1, right? Casting Darkness and still getting all of our attacks on our first turn with advantage. It's just awesome. Because yeah, Action Surge, for those who don't know, lets you have 2 actions once per short rest, right? Or sure, this could let us like set things up on round 1, kind of slow play it, save Action Surge for when you're just trying to burst somebody down. Always good. We also get Tactical Mind at Fighter 2, giving us another way to use our second wind, now as a way to try and succeed on an ability check that we failed, right? Adding a d10 to it and only expending the use of the second wind if the additional die roll caused the ability check to now succeed. Nice. At level 15, we would be a Fighter 3, and that means we get our Fighter subclass. And while Champion honestly would not be a terrible choice here, considering that we've got easy advantage most of the time and Elven accuracy, like critting on a 19 or 20 as a Champion with Elven accuracy would put our crit chance over 27%. That is awesome and fun, and is a lot more powerful if we're rolling more dice on our attacks, right? Maybe if you're playing with a buffed homebrew crit rule, like, the one where critical hits do max damage plus a die roll. I know a lot of people use this. We've used it at our table in the past. Then, Champion might be the way to go in that case, but I think I'm going to take Battlemaster instead. It's just so good and so versatile. Student of War gives us an artisan tool and skill proficiency of our choice. And then, combat superiority lets us learn 3 maneuvers fueled by our D8 superiority die, of which we have 4 per short rest for now. And there are just a lot of fantastic maneuver options, but the 2 that I would for sure want to pick up would be Riposte, first of all, which says that if an enemy misses us with an attack, we can use a reaction and a superiority die to make an attack against them with either a weapon or an unarmed strike, adding the superiority die in damage if we hit. And paired with Sentinel, I just feel like it gives us one more way to help ensure a reaction attack on our turn, which I love. Considering that most enemies will have disadvantage on attacks against us, and if they try to run away, we're probably going to hit them and root them in place thanks to Sentinel, right? Our chance at getting a reaction attack is fairly high when we couple these together especially. I'm tempted to add a % assumption at a reaction attack on our turn now as a result. I'm hesitant to do so since I think we will very often still want to like save our reaction for deflect attack, you know? I mean, sure, the enemy has disadvantage to hit us, but our armor class isn't going to be amazing. Maybe without the help of some solid magic items like bracers of defense anyways, which we could have. But at this level, enemies have a pretty solid bonus to their hit chance on average, right? So I don't know. Why don't I say like a 25% chance at a reaction attack? It won't do a lot for the numbers, but it's a small nod. The other and frankly more important maneuver that I would want for this build especially would be menacing attack. This says that when we hit with an attack, we can spend a superiority die to do extra damage, and then if they fail a wisdom save, the enemy is frightened until the end of our next turn. And I just think that like if I'm stalking my targets in the dark, slowing them, stunning them, rooting them to keep them inside that darkness, I really want to add fear into the mix to complete like the Dark Knight fantasy, you know? I actually love this so much that I would be sorely tempted to go this route, like maybe right after Monk 5 or 6, I think. And if you wanted to do that, I'd say go for it, especially if you knew your campaign was going to end at like level 10 or so. As for the third maneuver that we could pick up here, a trip attack would be nice just to like pile on more movement reduction, right? Since they'd have to spend half their move speed to stand if they're knocked prone. And I mean, they're probably slowed too, right? But I'm just going to say PYF for that third one. Maybe focus on getting like a utility or support maneuver. At level 16, I mean, I really want to go back to Monk, but there is a feat right there, and our wisdom has been languishing at 16 since level 1. So yeah, let's go fighter 4 so that we can get a feat and at least bump our wisdom to 18 to help out our armor class, our Monk DC, to say nothing of our wisdom saving throws, perception checks, etc. But finally for us, at level 17, yeah, back to Monk so that we can at least grab the amazing deflect energy feature, which says that now when we use deflect attack, we can deflect any damage, no matter the damage type, and not just bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, so long as it's actually an attack, right? We can't like deflect a fireball or anything, as awesome as that would be. But I mean, hey, we've got evasion, so. And yeah, I mean, one more level in Monk gets us Disciplined Survivor, which gives proficiency in all saving throws and lets us spend a key point to reroll any failed save. So maybe delay fighter until that point if you're smart, right? All depends on if you want more offense or more defense, of course, and you know me. Treant Monk would have gone Monk 14 for sure, and I don't blame him. Anyways, this is going to bring us to our final damage report. Since last check, we've picked up Action Surge to help get our full attack potential going right on round 1, some superiority dice, which I'll assume we're just using like 1 per round to try and frighten an enemy and add a d8 of damage, and then sure, let's say a 25% chance at a reaction attack every round. That might be generous if you're fighting enemies with a really high hit chance, and especially like True Sight, but it might be overly conservative otherwise, especially if you've got some solid AC buffing magic items, right? Anyways, other than that, we've also picked up some nice survivability and utility as well, but against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 82 damage per round, and against an 18 AC, it would be 80 DPR. And while that's a decent increase since last check, it kind of just keeps us in the middle of tier 2 like the last few checks, which honestly, with as much as we're bringing to the table in addition to our damage, is a pretty fantastic place to be. So let's bring it on home with some final thoughts. The tier score for this build, if you take the damage they do at each of the armor classes that we calculate for, at each of the 4 damage reports, average it all into one big number, we end up with a 52, which actually puts them right near the top of tier 2, second only to the Holy Blade in that tier, at least at the time of this recording, which was a really solid damage dealer. And you know what? If you would have asked me where a mostly all monk, shadow monk build would have ended up tier score wise before I built it and crunched the numbers, I probably would have said mid or maybe even bottom tier 2. Man, I love it when I'm wrong. And yeah, the thing I love most about this build, honestly, aside from just the sheer coolness of being a Nightcrawler-like ninja, is how reliable it is, right? Like, There aren't a lot of tricks or assumptions needed, unlike last week's Sorcerer Gish build. You don't have to ask your DM for a lot of favors or hand waving. It just works. Now, to be fair, it works a lot better if your combat encounters only go for 4 rounds and you're not getting more than like 3 combat encounters a day with a short rest in between, at least one of them. Early on, at least. After tier 2, you should be pretty fine focus points wise at all but the most grueling tables or on the most grueling of adventuring days. And also, the build works a heck of a lot better when you're not fighting enemies who have blind or true sight, right? And yeah, this is one of the things that you'll want to talk with your DM about for sure. I mean, ask very pointedly, look, if I bring this character to the table who's constantly using darkness to blind enemies, are you just gonna like start giving all the enemies blind fighting? And if they think there's a decent possibility that they might do that, then consider going a different route. I've experienced that actually, and it kind of sucks, honestly. DMs, please don't do this. Counter your players' builds once in a while to, keep it interesting and fun, keep them on their toes, sure, but generally let them feel powerful and play the character the way they want to play it. Please. Thank you. And hey, even when you do run into enemies who are going to be able to see in your magical darkness, the good news is you've still got a lot of fantastic tools at your disposal. Later on you won't need the darkness to teleport. You can still stun and slow enemies and make a boatload of attacks and just generally be awesome. And yeah, there's no reason you couldn't pick up like a quarterstaff and take the topple mastery with it, right? Or sure, the aforementioned trip attack from Battlemaster to still get yourself advantage on attacks in those situations, right? So it's not like, oh no, they can see in my darkness, my character's worthless. You are a silent terror on the battlefield, creating fear in your enemies everywhere as they try in vain to escape the stalking nightmare that you have become. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So, that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I love you guys. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. It means so much to me. I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week. And if you don't, I hope you will take some deep breaths and hang in there. It's going to be okay. I have to do that myself a lot lately. I hope that you will do good and be kind and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. The night I fell in sorrow, I knew I was alone. A dozen good time friendships, but my heart is still unknown. I thought I saw your footsteps in the sand along the shore, and I mumbled empty phrases that sang so well before. Now inches from the water, about to disappear. I feel you behind me, but how did you find me here? It is a David Wilcox kind of day, I'm telling you. Okay. I think I'd actually probably go like club, and thus we can see in it, but our enemies, but our so where was I? We can make an unarmed strike. Oh, wait. Say if you can. I think I was drunk when I wrote this. That doesn't make any sense. I've said booby prize in a video before, and I can't do it with a straight face because I have the intellect and sense of humor of a 7th grader. What is the etymology of booby prize? I don't know. I'm going to Google that later, but I'm sure that several of you will let me know in the comments, and that's better than Google, so yeah. Hey Siri, put yourself in airplane mode. Thank you. No scaling spells that increase... Buttercup is marrying Humperdinck in little less than half an hour. I didn't mean proficiency bonus times for Dave. Monk weapons. Martial. Light. Yeah. I was right. Hooray.